Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Jim Townsend, Director of the Carl Levin Center for Oversight and Democracy, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's celebration of our 10th anniversary. So we're so pleased you're here. I'm not going to say any more right now. I'm going to turn things over to Provost Lori Clabo, who's going to give us some welcoming remarks. Provost Clabo?
Thank you, Jim. And on behalf of the entire university leadership, it is really my honor to welcome everyone to celebrate this great occasion. It's hard to believe that we are here tonight to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Levin Center, a significant part of our law school. So 10 years ago, Senator Carl Levin established the center that bears his name through the combined efforts of Jocelyn Benson, who was then the dean of our law school, along with President Emeritus Roy Wilson, and dear friend of the university and member of the Board of Governors, Eugene Dreiker. As a longtime friend of Carl Levin, and with Carl's urging, Gene decided to chair the Levin Center's advisory board. As dean of the law school, Jocelyn Benson secured substantial funds to establish the Levin Center's endowment. It can't be overlooked that Carl's longtime Washington staff, Linda Gustitis and Elise Bean, were instrumental in working with the senator to establish this unique center and to help drive its programming. And for many years now, the Levin Center has been working closely with Dean Rick Bierschbach, who advocates on behalf of the center's initiatives and is always a tremendous partner. Our entire university team is so proud to be a small part of these efforts. At Wayne State, we remain deeply committed to our mission of advancing knowledge to positively impact our communities. The Prosperity Agenda is our shared promise of this to our students and our communities. The Levin Center's initiatives are prime examples of this mission, and our promise is being lived out every day here in the center. The Carl Levin Center for Oversight and Democracy is tackling a defining issue of our time, which is the need to restore public confidence in our governing institutions. The center does this in many ways, by working with lawmakers in Congress and across the nation, by collaborating with scholars here on the Wayne State campus and elsewhere, and by giving students from high school to law school the skills and knowledge to rebuild and sustain our democracy. The Levin Center is truly a model of innovation and service that other universities would be thrilled to call their own. And we're delighted that they don't have that opportunity because we do. Today, we are proud to recognize the impact of that the Levin Center has had in the last decade, and we look forward to what the next 10 years will bring. And it's now my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Dean of the Law School, Dean Rick Bierschbach.
Thank you, Provost Clabo. And before I say anything else, I want to thank you and the rest of the university leadership for your support of the center and of the law school. Your support has been instrumental in its success. This 10th anniversary event, recognizing contributions of the Carl Levin Center for Oversight and Democracy at Wayne Law, provides us with the opportunity to celebrate the achievements of this important addition to Wayne State University. What began as a means of continuing the legacy of an extraordinary member of the United States Senate has now developed into an institute of national impact that's seeking solutions to some of the most serious challenges of our time. And these include the decline of democratic institutions, the lack of bipartisanship at both the state and the federal level, and the loss of civic culture throughout the population. Senator Levin recognized these developing crises in the United States and the challenge they pose to our politics and our democracy. And he devoted his work to shaping our institutions to better serve the public interest. The Levin Center has, for now over a decade, carried the mantle of Senator Levin through its training programs of lawmakers at the state and the federal levels, its educational programs in high schools, and academic research on issues of civic importance. In following the ideals of Senator Levin, the center has become the nation's premier center of expertise on how to conduct legislative oversight that serves the people of our democracy. It's also training the next generation in the value and skills of democratic governance, something that we desperately need today. The law school at Wayne State University is proud to have the Carl Levin Center for Oversight and Democracy as a core component of its operation. We celebrate 10 years of remarkable achievements and look forward to a future where the Levin Center continues to expand its impact on our law school, our community, and on the nation. I'm going to turn it over now to the center's director, Jim Townsend. But before I do, I'm going to go off script for a moment and do something that I don't usually do in a crowd of this size. And I'm going to say that if you care about any of the things that we've just mentioned and that the provost mentioned, if you care about strong democratic institutions, bipartisanship, civic education, effective bipartisan oversight on behalf of the people, then I want to ask you to please consider supporting the center financially. It's hard to imagine a time when the center's mission is more needed or more important, and this work can only continue if people step up and help make it possible. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Townsend, the center's director. Jim, take it away.
Well, Provost Clabo and Dean Biersbach just demonstrated why we feel so lucky that we have this provost and this dean at this university. So I just want to say thank you so much from all of us at the Levin Center. What we're going to do today, I'm going to go through the program first, what's going to come next, and then I'm going to say a few words about the Levin Center. What we're going to do tonight is, after I say a few words and thank some of the people who've made the Levin Center possible, I'm going to show a couple of videos that kind of go through the journey that the Levin Center has been on over the last 10 years. And then I'm going to turn it over to Paul Hilligans. He's going to introduce Senator Alyssa Slotkin, who is going to speak about democracy and Congress and the role and duty that Congress has to defend and renew our democracy. After that, we're going to have a Q&A session, and we're going to bring up Congressman John Katko, a Republican, former congressman from New York, who's going to join Senator Slotkin and me, and we're going to do a Q&A session for a good long while. We're going to get through some important questions about what Congress's role is in our democracy and what it can do to try to restore our democracy. Now, everybody here, as you were coming in, had the opportunity to pick up a card and a pen, and we strongly encourage all of you to write down a question that you want us to address during that Q&A session, and I will do my very best to weave your questions into our discussion. So before we get to the program, let me say a few words about the people who've really made it possible for all of us to be here today. Provost Clabo and Dean Biersbach made some mention of this, but I really want to emphasize that Senator Levin really embodied this belief that our democracy is really only as powerful as the representation that our institutions offer the people. And he decided when he retired from the Senate to come back to his hometown and establish an institute here. And the Levin Center, began with a focus on oversight. But the reason Carl was so focused on oversight was that he was concerned that the people's branch of government, the branch of government that is supposed to be most responsive to the people, had stopped doing its job, had stopped really conducting oversight, and really had stopped tackling a lot of the difficult issues that people expect their representatives to tackle. So Carl set about creating this center, and he didn't do it alone. He had a lot of help from first two of his most brilliant staff members, Elise Bean and Linda Gustitis, who were mentioned earlier. I just want to repeat that Jocelyn Benson, who was dean of the law school here, played a crucial role in establishing this center, and Eugene Dreiker, who was who had been a member of the Wayne State Board of Governors and had held more positions than I have time to even talk about here at Wayne State, was also a close friend of Senator Levin's and did a wonderful job supporting us from the very beginning. And then Professor Jack Moak, who has been a crucial member of our team from the very beginning, played a very important role in getting us off the ground. If we could move to the next, to a slide, I want to acknowledge also some people who are not with us anymore. In addition to Senator Levin, who passed away in 2021, I want to again speak about Eugene Dreicher. Eugene served as the chair of our advisory board for 7 years, and he was an amazing resource. The answer was never no with Eugene. The answer was always, wait, we'll get this done. And he was somebody who went to work for us and did just enormous, so many of the things that we have are a result of Gene's really tireless work. Cy Moscow was a member of our advisory board from the very beginning, and he was a generous supporter of our work and also a great source of advice. Carl's cousin, Dan Levin, was a member of our advisory board from the very beginning and a generous supporter of our work from his home in Chicago. Senator Tom Coburn was a close collaborator of Senator Levin in the Senate doing oversight work, and when he and Carl retired, Senator Coburn agreed to join our advisory board and bring his credibility as a conservative Republican to our bipartisan organization. And then finally, I just want to say another word about Elise Bean. We lost Elise Bean this year to cancer, and we dearly miss her. She was first very much responsible for helping create the Levin Center. She was the director of our Washington office. She was at the center of so many of our most effective and successful initiatives. And she just brought an amazing brilliance and optimism to everything that we did. We miss all of these leaders every single day, but we take incredible inspiration from their example, and we are thinking of them all the time as we work to expand the work that they helped us begin. Now we can show the videos. So we're going to show two videos, one that just describes kind of the journey we've been on, and then a second video that just has some testimonials from some people that we have reached. So if we could cue those up.
In just a decade, the Levin Center for Oversight and Democracy has become the country's foremost authority on the power and responsibility lawmakers at all levels of government have to find the facts and use them to solve problems for the public good. Senator Carl Levin established the Levin Center at Wayne State University Law School in Detroit to advance legislative oversight that is bipartisan and fact-driven. The center opened a new office space in 2022. Since then, we have launched our State Oversight Academy, our civic education program, and an online oversight training program. And now we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary. Working with the Project on Government Oversight and the Lugar Center, our Washington office provides an intensive 2-day oversight training for congressional staff. This is in addition to our over 20 online tutorials and numerous resources about how to conduct good oversight, including an online case tracker that summarizes the latest legal developments affecting Congress's investigative powers. We have awarded 9 elected officials with the Carl Levin Award for Effective Oversight, honoring their outstanding bipartisan efforts to uncover facts and advance accountability in public life. In 2021, we launched our Portraits in Oversight, short summaries of historic oversight investigations that have shaped American history, now available as a book. Launched in 2023, our State Oversight Academy has provided oversight workshops to 13 states across the country, training over 500 state lawmakers and legislative staff. Our oversight workshops are now also available as an on-demand online course. The Academy's unique State Legislature Oversight Wiki is the first resource of its kind, summarizing oversight structures, partners, and jurisdictions for all 50 states and the U.S. territories. The Levin Center supports scholarly research to better understand the theory and practice of oversight. We have established a unique database of congressional oversight reports with over 1,500 entries and still growing. Our Oversight Fellowship has supported 10 early career academics, and we have awarded 6 outstanding academic papers with the Levin Center Award for Excellence in Oversight Research. We believe in the importance of connecting researchers and practitioners to help translate new findings into best practices. We want to inspire and educate the next generation about U.S. history, civics, and accountable government. At the high school level, we offer free lesson plans, videos, and reading materials to educators across Michigan and beyond. At the law school level, we offer Wayne Law students career panels, research assistantships, and congressional internships.
Internship with the Levin Center was one of the most formative experiences of my legal education. Working on the Congressional Oversight and Investigation Senate Committee showed me the power of law and promoting accountability and public service. The mentorship and opportunities I received helped me shape my path towards serving as an Army Judge Advocate today. I carry those lessons with me in my career and remain grateful to the Levin Center for its impact.
This was the first time in my memory that Oregon tried to do anything like a broad general oversight and accountability process at all. We did have bicameral and bipartisan support for it. The Levin Center, the state oversight program, really helped kick it off. We didn't get where we wanted to get in the first session, but we are going to come back and we will be continuing to look to the Levin Center for help with that.
Levin Center has been instrumental in providing support, resources, and guidance for my research on congressional oversight of federal spending. From making connections with practitioners and senior scholars to sharing findings and data from prior research projects, the Levin Center has played an important role in making research into oversight both possible and impactful.
As a recent participant of the Levin Center's Oversight Boot Camp on the Hill, one of the most valuable yet underrated things that I obtained was making bipartisan connections. The Oversight Camp promotes bipartisanship, however, sometimes it's hard on the Hill to make these connections. By being immersed with and working alongside counterparts across the aisle and from both the Senate and the House, we were able to develop connections that would hopefully be resourceful to us in future investigations.
Hi, I'm a high school teacher, and one of the things I enjoy the most about the Carl Levin Center programs and the learning by hearing in particular is the fact that students get excited about it. I used the material with my AP class last year, and at the end of the year, every single student that I spoke to was just super excited, and they actually recommended that I use the program multiple times this following year with my incoming students because it was really engaging and hands-on learning. In addition to just learning content, they engaged with content, which was an amazing experience.
Well, I hope you learned something from those videos. You might have noticed that those are in-house produced videos. And the music, that's in-house, but that's not the Levin Center's in-house band. We're thinking maybe in the 15th anniversary, we might have an in-house band, but there's a few of us that like to sing and play, so stay tuned. There might be something coming in that regard. I want to say a few more words about the Levin Center, and then I'm going to turn it over to Paul. Well, I want to say words about the Levin Center, and then I want to say words about what we're trying to do tonight. One of our largest foundation supporters said that it gets more bang for the buck from the Levin Center than any other grantee. That continues to be true because of the remarkable efforts of our staff here in Detroit, in our headquarters, and our team in Washington, D.C. And I want to ask members of our team, I know a lot of them are out in the hall, but I want to ask members of our team, anybody who's in here, or come on in, stand up and be recognized if you're around. I guess everybody's out there. I should have asked everybody to come in. Oh, okay, we got a couple members here, and here, and back there. It's an amazing team. Not everybody can be here tonight, but I really hope that you'll have a chance to talk with them after the program during the strolling dinner. They'd love to talk with you about the work that they do. I also want to thank, Margot, are you here? I really want to thank Margot Les Paris for the lead role that she played in making tonight's event happen. So please join me in thank her. She did a fantastic, amazing job. What a difference a decade makes. And thank goodness for Carl Levin, who in early 2015 might not have seen Donald Trump and MAGA coming, but who understood the grave risk we were taking in allowing Congress to lose its ability to perform its basic functions, particularly in the area of oversight. So we started this center to do something about it. Things in Congress have only gotten worse since then, but that is only a reason to redouble our efforts. We cannot give up on the people's branch of government, the branch designed to hold the executive in check, to be a finger in the dike, or maybe a dam against the onslaught of tyranny. Congress was at the beginning and must be again our response to tyranny. 251 years ago, in 1774, the people of the American colonies sent elected representatives to Philadelphia to what they called the Continental Congress to stand for them collectively against the tyranny of King George and to demand representation in matters that affected their lives. 2 years later, that Congress birthed our nation, enabled the United States to defeat the British Empire, and ran our country for 15 years until we ratified the Constitution, and which, by the way, gives Congress the primary role in leading our country. The Constitution gives Congress a multitude of powers. Many of these you're familiar with, of course: the power of the purse, the power to make the law, declare war, approve treaties, structure the judiciary, and so much more. And because we are in a law school, I'm going to briefly quote the Constitution, where it says the Congress has the power to make all laws, quote, which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested in the Constitution in the government of the by the Constitution in the government of the United States, unquote. Basically, this means that Congress has the power to make the rules and oversee the work of the executive branch to ensure that the law is faithfully executed. The founders did this because they wanted the branch of government that is most accountable to the people to hold the most power. But in recent decades, we have seen members of Congress give up that power to the president. And by doing so, they have weakened the accountability. They've weakened accountability of government, and they have denied their constituents representation in the decisions that affect their lives. Changing this state of affairs will not be quick or easy, but since our founding, America has risen to meet its most difficult challenges, and it has often done so through its representatives in Congress. At the Levin Center, we believe that strengthening Congress's ability to conduct bipartisan, fact-based oversight is essential to restoring the intended role of Congress. We have built all this in just about 10 years, and we think our beloved founder, Carl Levin, who passed away in 2021, would be pretty proud. But we have much more to do, and frankly, we're only just getting started. We couldn't do any of this without the vision and generosity of many people here tonight, of Wayne State University, of its terrific law school, and particularly two advisory boards that we have. The law school's Faculty Advisory Committee, which is chaired by Jack Moak, Professor Jack Moak, and is a member of that board is also with us, Brad Roth, Professor Brad Roth. And also our External Advisory Board, which is chaired by Paul Hilligans. Both these boards do excellent work overseeing and keeping our center accountable. So in a moment, I'm going to invite Paul Hilligans up now to introduce Senator Slotkin. Let's see, yeah, this should be about right. Introduce Senator Slotkin. When Paul was Speaker of the Michigan House of Representatives, he set the standard for accountable representation, championing oversight and working across the aisle to solve problems. In 1995, I think it's 95, am I correct? He worked out a unique power-sharing arrangement with his Democratic counterpart, Curtis Hertel Sr., when the House's membership was tied, 55-55. It was the most productive session, possibly the most productive session in the history of our state. In many ways, politics in our country is at a similar stalemate between Republicans and Democrats. And I think we all could learn from the leadership Paul exhibited in those times. I know I learn every day when we talk. And Paul, I turn the floor over to you. Thank you.
So Jim gave me a job to introduce Senator Slatkin, but I'm going to go off script just shortly. We need to thank Jim for your great leadership, your inspired and inspiring leadership. You've assembled an outstanding team, and whenever our external advisory board meets to hear about the progress, we always ask ourselves, why are we such a well-kept secret among people who care about the future of our democratic system? And that's why I want to thank you tonight for being here. Not only your past generosity, but we hope that what you hear tonight will allow you to help spread the word about the important work the Levin Center is undertaking. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Senator Alyssa Slatkin as our keynote speaker. Senator Slatkin has had a remarkable career with experience in military, intelligence services, and policy advisory roles. She has already established herself as a force in the United States Senate. A former CIA analyst who served 3 tours in Iraq alongside the U.S. military, Senator Slatkin then worked in national security roles at the Pentagon and White House under Presidents Bush and Obama. In the Obama administration, she provided briefings for the president on some of the most sensitive national security matters of the day, and was subsequently nominated and confirmed to serve as Assistant Secretary of Defense for Internal Security Affairs at the Pentagon. In 2018, she was elected to a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. She was reelected to the House in 2020 and again in 2022. Her work in the House focused on expanding access to affordable health care, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, and bringing critical supply chains and manufacturing back to Michigan. In November 2024, Alyssa was elected to serve Michigan in the United States Senate, succeeding Debbie Stabenow. She provided, as you probably well know, the Democratic response to President Donald Trump's address to a joint session of Congress in March of this year, which reflects her growing stature. Senator Slatkin has been a vocal proponent of civil democracy and our constitutional rights and responsibilities. At a time when our nation is so divided and the political environment so toxic, she is an important, much-needed voice seeking to carry out Carl Levin's legacy and the Levin Center's mission, a legacy and mission of civic learning, bipartisan congressional oversight and problem solving, and an accountable, responsive government. Senator, thank you for being with us tonight, and please help me welcome Senator Alyssa Slatkin.
Of course. Hi, everybody. All right. Oh, my gosh. Good evening, everyone. Goodness, I hope I'm not hurting this. Can you still see the seal and do what you need to do? Okay. Where is my good friend John Katko? It is really well worth everyone's time to be here. I could not be prouder to be celebrating 10 years retired by Carl Levin, the success of the Levin Center. Thank you to Paul. Thank you to Dean Bierschbach, Provost Klebo, and everyone else. I know there's a lot of people in the room who really care about Carl Levin, served with Carl Levin. and got a chance to learn from Carl Levin, which I got to do a little bit. I'm particularly happy to be here with my friend John Katko. We served together in the House, and I think I invited him here. I put his name on the list for the Levin Center to reach out to him because when we served together, I really felt like this was what our government was supposed to look like. A Republican and a Democrat working on the Homeland Security Committee. He's former Department of Justice, I'm former CIA, putting the mission of the country ahead of partisanship. And then John and I also served in something called the Problem Solvers Caucus together. That's the only bipartisan caucus left in the US House. Equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans. You literally have to find someone on the other side of the aisle and walk in 2 by 2 like Noah's Ark in order to get in. You sign a civility pledge. Can you imagine how badly we need that in our country right now? So John and I also served in that bipartisan group together. And when we wanted to have a conversation about bipartisanship, he was the first person I thought of, and I'm really thankful that he made the trip. So thank you. Okay, so I have a lot to say in front of the Levin Center about Carl Levin. I think for many of us, Carl is the example, certainly in the state of Michigan, but way beyond Michigan, for what it means to serve with integrity. I remember when I was running for the first time, and I ran in a Republican-leaning district, and so people would come up to me and they'd say, I didn't agree with Carl on X, and I didn't agree with Carl on Y, and I didn't agree with Carl on Z, but he had integrity, so I voted for him. And I think that's just about the highest standard you can get to in a state like Michigan. Our paths crossed many times. Most formally for me was my first trip ever to Washington, D.C. at 11 years old. And because we knew someone who knew someone, we got in with our senator. I remember his office seemed like this massive, amazing place to me, very historic. One of the most fun things in the world is I got to hang out in that same office. It's now held by Senator Michael Bennet. And when I went to go visit him in our first sort of in-call, he was pointing out to me all the things that had been handed down from Carl. I'm going to steal some of those because Michael Bennet is leaving the Senate. I'm going to steal some of them back. So the first time I ever got a taste of Washington was through going to Carl Levin's office. Then many years later, I was the special assistant for the first director of national intelligence, John Negroponte. And I was like a baby, almost like bag carrier, making sure that he got to where he needed to go when he was briefing Congress. And after he briefed Carl in the Armed Services Committee, John Negroponte introduced me and said, she's from Michigan. And he said, what's your name? And I said, Alyssa Slotkin. He said, Slotkin. Who is Hugo Slotkin to you? And I said, that's my grandfather. And he said, my father represented your grandfather in actually a discrimination case when a house was sold out from under my grandfather in Grosse Pointe. Because he was Jewish and Carl's father represented him. So it was just one of those perfect examples of Carl Levin, whip smart, just went back into the files as I was standing there and figured out that he remembered the name. And then many, many years later after that, Carl Levin's final hearing as the chairman of the Armed Services Committee was my confirmation hearing to be an Assistant Secretary of Defense. And one of the great joys and pains of my life was that confirmation hearing because while Carl got to chair it, John McCain was real mad that day, and I was on the receiving end of the full McCain treatment that afternoon. But it's one of the things that I'm most proud of is that I got to be there for his final hearing as a chairman. I think the thing that I really remember about Carl Levin, besides his great integrity, was that he cared deeply in his bones for the state of Michigan. And you could have a conversation with him years later when he retired that could range between small town politics, to big national security issues. He could hang high and hang low. He could do both of those things. I think that it's easy for me to say that the model I have as a senator is most definitely Carl Levin. especially someone like me who comes from the national security world. I was always eager for his advice. When I started to run myself for the first time in 2018, I sought him out. He was sitting in that Honigman office, some of you may remember, and it was like stacked papers. I mean, you could barely see this man. He had stacked papers around him. He had his glasses down like the kindly old shoemaker, down on his nose, and he would sit there and give me an incredible amount of time for someone who had never run, for someone who was running in a tough district and wasn't favored to win. Carl was the first person, I think, to really take me seriously from the elected world. And then he became one of the first people to endorse me. And one of the pictures I have in my office is a picture of him writing down notes on one of those Senate cards, trying to figure out what he was going to say in my endorsement event. Now, in classic Carl Levin fashion, when we called him and said, would you ever consider endorsing her? Would you do an event? That would be such a big deal for me. He's like, I would be happy to, but can someone get me a ride? And so my staffer in like a Honda Civic picked up Carl Levin, and he did not care, right? There was no pretension about him, no need for the armored SUV to pick him up. He was as humble on the first day he started as the final day that he left the Senate, which is, again, an important lesson that elected leaders could learn from today. So he endorsed me in that race, and what he said in that speech, I think, is extremely relevant to the times we're living in. He said, quote, "I don't think it has ever been more important in our history that Congress provide a check on the executive branch because of the person we have in the White House right now." That's what he said then. I think his words ring true today. That was obviously in President Trump's first administration. But I think I constantly think to myself now, with everything going on in 2025, I think to myself, what would Carl Levin do? WWCLD. What would Carl Levin do when faced with really difficult questions? Essential questions of our democracy. He was never one to simply complain, right? He was not going to do what we call at the Pentagon admiring the problem, talking about it and examining it, but then not doing anything about it. He was someone who acted. And his primary way of acting was through his passion, which was investigations, right? He served on important committees that helped expose the loopholes that the executive branch and other powerful people were exploiting to get ahead. He would want right now Congress to reassert its Article I powers, just the basic things that are in the Constitution, that the Congress has the power of the purse, and the executive must work with, not against the Congress if they want money and to make financial decisions. We're seeing these kinds of abuses that would have him turn in his grave in real time. Attacking independent organizations like the Fed and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, deploying the military in American streets, refusing to spend congressionally appropriated funds and usurping the power of the purse, personally profiting off the presidency would really irk him. And the president has become, we believe, a billionaire in the meme coin that he has issued. This would really turn Carl over. He hated when people got rich off the backs of the taxpayer. He would be leading the charge if he was here to fix these issues. He'd be investigating all of these things, and he'd be building support for the legislation to close those loopholes. He spent nearly a decade investigating how corporations and individuals were using tax loopholes to avoid paying near $100 billion in taxes. And one of his most famous investigations was on Enron, right? Seems like 100 years ago, but on Enron, where Enron had massive debts and inflated earnings. He introduced a legislation to close what's now called the Enron loophole, which allowed many of these abuses. And he fought hard to pass it. He built coalitions to pass it, including across the aisle, and eventually succeeded overcoming a presidential veto, which is not an easy thing to do. But I think that Carl would also recognize in a very twisted way that what Trump and those around him are doing provides us actually a roadmap of where we need to make government oversight stronger. I think one of the things that Trump has laid bare is that a lot of things that we thought were maybe enshrined in law were actually just tradition and habit and practice of good and decent people on both sides of the aisle. That's what we need to be doing and taking from the "what would Carl do" mantra from both parties. We need to call out things that we disagree with, even if we're worried that the president may go after us because of those words. We need to then try and fix those loopholes. That's our job in Congress and as elected representatives of the people. We need to reassert that Article I authority and that voice of the people. That brings me to another important point, which is holding the president and the executive branch accountable should not be a partisan exercise, right? What is hardest for me as a very brand new baby freshman senator is watching some of my peers on the other side of the aisle, many of them who I grew up with. Right? Some of my peers have been in for 30 years. So when I was a baby CIA analyst, they would come on Senate delegations to Baghdad, and I'd be like shoved out there to brief them. These are the people that I'm now serving with, and I had great respect for many of them on both sides of the aisle. But to watch them give away their power, to watch them take what I know 30 years ago they would never have considered, kind of giving the red carpet to the president to dictate what this separate branch of government does, that to me oversight should not be a partisan exercise. It should be something we all are engaged in. And I think, it's not just a Democrat or Republican thing, it's an American thing to provide oversight. Just by being born in this country, distrust of power is kind of in our DNA, right? We were occupied by the British, we were a colony, and we did not like that. And so we rose up and we overthrew that regime. It's part of who we are as Americans that we don't always just take hook, line, and sinker what our elected officials in power are telling us. And Carl knew that for America to endure, government oversight had to be nonpartisan. Questioning power is not some sort of deficit. It is actually patriotism. It actually makes our policies stronger and more durable. It's interesting, one of his first PSI investigations was on foreign campaign donations back in 1996. This probe was sparked by an allegation that the Clinton campaign had received money from Chinese donors. That was the allegation. It was a pretty broad-ranging investigation of campaign finance. It was led by Carl Levin and a Democrat John Glenn, who into the re-election of a Democrat in the White House. Right, 2 Democrats going at a Democratic leader. It was important that Carl didn't just shy away from abuses on the Democratic side, and he felt like his investigation was even more important for that reason. In 2009, as chairman of the Armed Services Committee, he held hearings on President Obama's surge in Afghanistan, quite critically, right? Sharply questioning the Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates at the time, and Secretary Hillary Clinton, about the wisdom of sending an additional 35,000 troops to Afghanistan. So it's just by looking at his life, you can see this ideal of the Senate and of senators who did not fear their own party, their own political ramifications. And that's what we need today. Carl, I think in closing, he almost to a fault wanted to do the right thing. Many of us who are in the national security world realized that actually during Carl Levin's time as chairman of the Armed Services Committee, we actually dropped the number of defense jobs in Michigan slightly. There is no other elected leader who wouldn't have used their position to just create a jobs program and bring all these things to Michigan. He understood that he had a higher purpose in making sure the military was prepared for future fights and didn't use his position in order to make himself look good or in order to just sort of feed the beast back home. So I'm not naive. There are lots of barriers. We can't just be like Carl and it's all going to work out. But I just think today, in honor of the 10th anniversary of the center, it was good to remind ourselves of what would Carl be doing right now. and to not let that flame of passion and oversight die with him, but maintain it. Lastly, I'll just say I appreciate the opportunity to be here. As I said, as your freshman senator, we couldn't have a better example for me to look up to. And for what it's worth, in front of a bunch of people who worked for him, who loved him, who knew him, who supported him, and the center that is carrying on his legacy, I will do everything in my power to carry on that legacy myself every single day in the moment we find ourselves in. So thank you for having me. Thanks so much. Of course. You want me to sit down?
Thank you, Senator Slotkin, for those words. While we have a microphone attached to the senator, I'm now going to introduce our other speaker tonight, who's going to join Senator Slotkin and me in a Q&A session. John Katko was elected to represent New York's 24th district in the U.S. House in 2014, and he represented his central New York district, which includes Syracuse and surrounding communities, until 2023. Prior to running for office, John spent 2 decades as an attorney. He worked at the Securities and Exchange Commission and spent the bulk of his career as a assistant U.S. attorney in the Justice Department, where he led the Organized Crime Division. John had a distinguished career in Congress. He served on the Homeland Security Committee and the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. But perhaps his finest hour was his decision to join a small number of Republican colleagues in voting to impeach President Trump for inciting the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. John was the first House Republican to announce his intent to vote to impeach. Shortly thereafter, John helped to lead the effort to create an independent commission to investigate the January 6 attack. John, who slept in his office in Washington on a pull-out couch, is hardly resting since leaving Congress. He hosts a TV show on PBS in New York called Balancing Act. It's a program that strives to bring balance to discussions of difficult political issues while adding a touch of fun along the way. Please welcome Congressman John Katko.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me here today, and I'm really honored to be here with my good friend, Alyssa. We did a lot of good things together in Congress, and she is one of the bright spots of trying to get things done while I was there, and we really enjoyed our time together, and we had mutual respect that never gets shown in the media, because the media will never talk about times when we're working together. They talk about what you do, and they highlight the things that aren't going on. So I'm glad to be here with my good friend. The Levin Center is kind of in my wheelhouse, what I believe in. I've always believed in looking at things from a different perspective and trying to understand someone else's point of view. And I always talk to people about politics the way I talk to them about my wife and my personal relationships and business dealings. And I always like to ask this question at the beginning of every presentation. How many here have ever been in a relationship where you got everything you wanted all the time? Oh, come on.
Oh, yeah.
There's always one, right? And how many people in business get 100% of what they want out of every business deal? It doesn't happen. But yet, the American people are now at the point where they are thinking that they deserve and demand 100% out of their politician, whether or not somebody has any, like nobody else has any other point of view. And it's very hard for people like Alyssa and myself to deal with people like that, right? Especially within our own party. That's probably even more difficult. So yes, we have a bubbling problem in our country that I don't know if it's at crisis level, but it's approaching it. But I do think that the problem emanates not so much from who's in this office right now in the presidency, because I think he's really kind of the end product of what came before him. And he's just exploiting what what's before him. And he's very good at exploiting the advantages that he has. So what's happened, I think, in the last several decades at a minimum, and certainly in the advent of this modern technology age, is a couple of things. When I was a kid, I'm saying that now, it's not really old. When I was a kid, ABC, NBC, CBS, right? And the worst thing you could call an anchor or a reporter is biased. And now that is the mantra that people live by in the media. So media is so segmented, it's unbelievable. So if you're a hardcore liberal or a hardcore Republican, you can go to a certain news cycle or news place and get exactly what you want as far as what you want to hear, and you don't have to hear about the other side. So that kind of reinforces the problem, and it reinforces your belief that you are always right. And it helps develop some of the individuals who have done these horrific things because they believe and only believe what they believe is right. And it kind of fuels it, right? And then, of course, you have the internet. And when I was in office, they used to write so many horrific things about me on the internet, on a local paper, that the paper as a whole stopped posting comments for their articles because of it, right? And of course, they're nameless, they're faceless, and they don't have to be held accountable. So it's very easy to do that. Now, Alyssa will agree with me, I think. The vast majority of people are slaves to that, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene, on what planet would someone like her have any sort of authority or power or juice were it not for social media, right? Her power comes from her social media, right? And she knows that, and she feeds at a steady diet, and she has millions of followers, and therefore she has juice. People understand that. And the other thing that people understand in office now is that if they want to get reelected, they have to satisfy that appetite of those people. And that is the problem, right? So many people we know, and we can get into this later, so many people we know are voting to save their job every single vote. They dispense with their beliefs at the front door. And even people within the Problem Solvers Caucus, to some extent, some of them, would talk a big talk, but they really didn't walk the walk. And Alyssa and I both saw that time and again. But when you're simply want to get reelected instead of doing what's right for your country, that's the problem we have. So are we in crisis mode? Probably. Are we at a critical juncture? No. The 1850s was a critical juncture in our nation's history, right before the Civil War. The Civil War, of course, was a critical juncture. The fallout from Vietnam, the removal from office, basically, of President Nixon. So many things that have happened in our country's history have been worse than this. It just seems worse because we're getting fed a steady diet of it every day. And even since the murder of Charlie Kirk, whether you liked him or not, doesn't matter. What are you seeing? It's not a reckoning. It's not like, hey, we got to tone this down. It's Trump saying it's all the Democrats' fault. Some people saying he got what he deserved, and nothing about we got to bring this down. And so, in my opinion, the only way we're going to get to a point where we're going to get back to an era where we can have some change, and it's going to be very difficult, and it may be unlikely, is if you get a leader, especially a leader in the White House, I don't care what party it is, that has the guts to work with the other side. They're not doing it now. And Biden didn't, to the most part. I was on a meeting or two with him, but he really didn't. And Trump certainly isn't. And that's the way it's been going for the last several cycles. You can't have bipartisanship and not even meeting with the other side. And that's what we have to get back to. And it's going to be a tough road to hoe. But I do think that, to answer your question, there is a bubbling crisis. It's not at a critical stage yet, but it's getting there. So have a nice night, everybody.
Can everybody hear me now? Okay. Senator Slacken, obviously, if you want to follow up on that, I want to ask a follow-up question to you first, John. You spent 8 years in Congress and decided not to run for re-election. Can you talk about what caused you to make that decision? And then, Senator Slacken, obviously, you have taken the next step and run for the Senate. I'd like to sort of hear each of you talk about your own sort of assessment of the situation and what caused you to make one decision and you to make another.
Sure. Well, first of all, people like Alyssa and I got most of the bills passed. And it wasn't rocket science. science. I would go across the island and say, I made a rule for myself and my staff, which drove them crazy. I would never submit a bill for consideration until I had the Democratic sponsor as a lead on the bill. Never. And drove my staff nuts. They come in and say, I can't find anybody. I'm like, well, work with them until you can. And if we have to change a bill, we have to change a bill, but I'm not doing it. And end up having more bills passed than most, and I think Alyssa was in the same boat. So that's absolutely true. I believed in term limits, so I figured 8 to 12 years was about right. And that was about after 8 years, but that wasn't the driving force for it. Something happened right before January 6th that I rarely share in public, but I'm going to share with you because it's important. And it's illustrative of what I've been saying. The whole mess of the election had happened, and Trump had put all his eggs in the basket of overturning the election results, which is insane, right? And failing to understand that the Electoral College count is simply a ministerial act by Congress. You bring the votes on paper, you come to the House, we just say, like, we bless it, and that's it. That's simply like a ministerial act in our democracy. So once Trump lost all the lawsuits, including the ones that went to the Supreme Court that was dominated by justices he appointed, he had basically jettisoned anybody from his administration that wasn't telling what he wanted to hear, that he could overturn the election. And so the nutty cadre of people that he had around him convinced him that he could overturn the Electoral College results. And so the vote for the Electoral College became a big thing, right? And that began January 6th. Right before then, I remember walking out of the house, as I did every night. I'd come out over these steps and walk back to my office outside. And this guy came up to me, and I'm not going to say his name, I never have, and I won't. But he was from the Freedom Caucus, which is the far-right folks. And he looked around to make sure no one saw me. And saw him with me. So I was walking back to my office, he walked with me, and he's like, hey, you know, I want to talk about the Electoral College. Now, this individual is a very astute student of the Constitution, and even though he's a very right-wing guy, he was somebody that I thought was rational. So I'm walking back, and I'm having this discussion with him, and he goes, yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. I know you're going to vote to affirm the Electoral College. And he goes, I totally agree with that. And I'm like, oh, this guy's going to do the right thing. This is great. And he said, it is simply a ministerial act. There's nothing else that in the Constitution that would warrant us to overturn the election. He goes, but I just can't do it. And I'm like, well, why not? And he goes, I don't want the hassle back home. So let that sink in a second. He'd rather overturn the Constitution than deal with a little hassle back home. And that was one of those thunderbolt moments to me where I said to myself, and then he finished it by saying, you know, I don't want to get knocked out. I don't want to have a primary. Because the far left and the far right primaries are terrible. And that's all they worry about because gerrymandering has destroyed this country on both sides. And if everyone says it's all Republicans' fault or all Democrats' fault, so you're just all full of crap. Because it's both sides' fault. For every reaction, they're both exploiting it now, and that's one of the big problems. You don't have to worry about a general election, you worry about your primary, right? So that's part of the problem with this whole mix of why we're in a crisis mode now. So when I heard that, I just like, why am I doing this, right? Then, of course, January 6th happened, and there's no doubt in my mind that Trump caused it, and there's something I don't know if you even know this. That day, I got a call from Leader McCarthy telling me that he had just spoke to Trump. And I was in a leadership circle with McCarthy and Scalise and all them. He said, I just called Trump, and I told him he's the only one that can stop this. And I want him to, and please stop this. And Kevin was begging him. And Trump said, well, and he knew that the vice president was in danger and his wife was in danger. They were trapped in the Capitol. And the president's response was words to the effect, well, I think those people that are going into the Capitol care a lot more about me than they do. And so I'm not going to do anything to lift a finger to stop this. And he followed up after Pence was rescued from the White House with a series of very corrosive texts saying how bad Pence was, because he thought Pence was going to overturn the election. Pence told him that morning he wouldn't. So when I had no doubt in my mind that I had to do the right thing. And I knew I was probably going to sacrifice my job, but remarkably, the polling showed I would have won anyways, my district. But the combination of those things, like, what am I doing here? And so I did the vote, and I decided after that, probably a while after that, but I've wrestled for a long time, but I couldn't get out of my mind how many people are doing this to save their jobs instead of doing what's right. That's not public service. Public service is sacrifice. Public service is doing the right thing when it's really tough, and especially when no one's looking. And these people, the vast majority of people, think Alyssa will agree, vast majority of people in Congress, I don't know about the Senate as much because they have 6-year terms, but not in the House, for sure. That's what they do on both sides of them. And quite frankly, shame on them for doing that.
Senator Slotkin, you.
Yeah, let's give a round of applause to John Kakko. You can see why we invited him here, and I lament that he is not still in Congress.
My wife doesn't.
Yeah, I know. I think for me, I would not have run in the first place as a longtime national security person who had worked for both Democrats and Republicans proudly. I would not have run for Congress in the beginning if I felt like it was just, if it was like a Mitt Romney and we had a Republican president who maybe I didn't agree with on a lot of things, but he still believed in the fundamentals of democracy. So I ran for the purpose of being part of the loyal opposition and pushing back, would have had no way of knowing that Senator Stabenow was going to do a really unusual thing and retire, at 74, and not stay, and go out on top and all those things. So, and I think for me, at a certain point, I feel like I am called to serve in order to be a pushback on what's happening. I mean, I have things I care deeply about, issues that I want to work on that that should and are in many cases very bipartisan. But I think for me, if you've been in service as John has been and I have been, and you risked your life and given your life to the country that you love, and then watching it every day kind of eat itself alive, I feel that in my bones. And so, when Senator Stabenow said that she was not coming back, that felt like, and I certainly didn't want the 2-year terms anymore, of running every 2 years in a tough district. That's a hard thing to do. But for me, it was feeling like this is part of my service, and it's just a different form of what I was doing on 3 tours in Iraq or serving at the CIA. The country I love is not well right now. It's like a loved one who is ill. And what do you do when someone you love is ill? You don't give up on it. And you nurse it back to health, and you bob and weave and figure out what treatment, what is it? And there's no perfect answer, but to me, I felt very strongly that that I care about this country, and I'm not going to let it go down like this.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we were hoping to focus this conversation on Congress and what can be done, diagnosing sort of what is happening in Congress and what can be done. There is, a lot of polling out there that shows that Congress is really at a near historical low in terms of people's approval of the job it is doing. It's indicating that people are really losing faith in the people's branch of government. What do you think, and I'll start with you, Senator Slotkin, what do you think is really at root with people's dissatisfaction with Congress, and what do you think we need to be doing to turn that around?
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, if you ask like the average Michigander and probably the upstate New Yorker, maybe all New Yorkers, they have more faith in their local mayor than they do in their senator or congressperson, because it's very far away. Like, the mayor gets the trash picked up. The mayor, they can see at, walking in and out of town hall and engage him if they feel like, they need more, broadband internet or whatever. So people tend to have more trust in people that are here closer to home for them. And then, people like results. People feel like, look, Donald Trump often has the wrong answer to the right question. He has absolutely picked up on a very real feeling among a lot of people that the federal government isn't doing things that help the average American. And to me, certainly in this state, we have a crisis around people getting into the middle class. People can't achieve what their parents achieved, and they're pissed, and they feel shame about that, and they don't feel like their government is helping them. And so he's picked up on that rightly. I think his suggestions on what to do about it are either sloppy or just kind of burn it all down. But he's diagnosed that there's that sentiment. And in the House and the Senate, nothing gets done alone, right? You can't be a single person, single congressperson, single senator, and just pass a bill. It takes time. You got to build coalitions. And then when we're as fractious as we are now, that's even harder. So they don't see the results, and they don't understand how the federal government is connected to them. And I think you add to that a real feeling that both sides of the aisle, and trust me, it is not a partisan feeling. People feel that both sides of the aisle use their positions to enrich themselves, right? To literally, whether it's stock trading while you're in office, you got a lot of our peers got the COVID briefs we all got, and then made a bunch of trades in March of 2020 right after hearing those, both sides of the aisle. That just chafes people. That just bothers people. And so I think that there's a number of things that people feel that are hurting the overall reputation. So for me, it would start with a whole bunch of cleanup corruption laws that should be bipartisan, right? I'm the co-sponsor of no tax trades for members of Congress, right? You just put it in a blind trust or do something else, but don't get classified briefings and then go and trade on that. Nor your spouse, right? Which affects a lot of people, Democrats and Republicans. I think gerrymandering is a horrible just pox on our politics. And if they're taking, here in Michigan, we passed a citizens commission. We have very competitive districts because of it. And if we could make that federal law, and again, that to me would go a long way to this problem of everyone worried about their primary.
But I would just interject that it's been great that we have gotten rid of gerrymandering, but our politics in Michigan, if you're watching at all what's going on in the Michigan legislature right now, they are struggling to really do the people's business to pass a budget.
Yep.
So as important as that is, it seems like we've got to do even more. That's a threshold change that we need.
Yeah, it's necessary but not sufficient
Right.
to change the climate. People also, per John's point, no adult gets everything they want. And people have sold the public on this idea that if you accept compromise, you're somehow folding in a bad representative, when we all know in our normal lives, we are compromising constantly in order to make progress. So I think you're right. It's not going to make everything perfect, but you got to start with people being able to trust that people aren't getting into these jobs to enrich themselves, right? And to just have a jobs program for the rest of their life. And then you got to actually show that you're addressing their issues. Donald Trump won an election, including in this state, because he understood that people were zeroed in on their pocketbooks. How many doors did I knock on and people were like, look, I don't really like Donald Trump, but I think he's my best shot of getting more money in my pocket. If we don't address the economic issues, the economic security or insecurity issues, especially in this state, then we don't deserve people's vote. And so, again, he's picked up on something. Right question, wrong answer. And he's going to raise every cost you have, right? He's in the process of doing that. But I think you got to, Trump is very good at taking one issue, messaging it on it over and over and over again, telling you he's doing something, even if he's not. We have to actually address the core issue, which is in this state, people's pocketbooks and their kids. That's what they're focused on.
John, what do you think about the way people have come to condemn Congress? What do you think about the reasons for that?
Well, they're 100% right. But to some extent, they're always a convenient punching bag, and historically the numbers have never been great. But when you have things like, for me, which was a horror, was a big, beautiful bill, whatever, how many B's are in the latest bill. And I'm not here just bashing Freedom Caucus, but it's another great example. The bill blows a hole in our deficit. $3 trillion over 10 years. $3 trillion. And the Freedom Caucus emanated from the Tea Party movement of 2010. The Tea Party movement of 2010 was taxed enough already, smaller government, fiscal responsibility, don't have deficits. And every single one of them voted for it. When it first came over from the Senate, they all said, well, wait, we can't do this. And one by one, Trump said, I'm going to primary you, I'm going to primary you, I'm going to primary you. And they all folded. That's why people are upset, because no one's taken a principled stand on anything. And what's the worst that's going to happen? And this is going to depress you. You get out of Congress, you make more money, and you work less. It's not the end of the world. Sorry, listen. But it's not, right? And people don't hate you every 2 seconds. Now, when I go to the grocery store now, everyone's like so nice to me. Oh, we wish you were in. I'm like, you're so full of shit. You people are doing this. You people were yelling at me when I was in office. I know it. But anyways, so there's life after Congress. There's life after Senate. And there's no principle left. And I look back on a couple of leaders that profoundly impacted me. And it's going to shock you to some extent. One, obviously, Ronald Reagan, but also Bill Clinton. His personal stuff aside. Let's take Reagan for a second. Before Reagan got even into office, he had dinner with Tip O'Neill twice with their spouses, right? Tip O'Neill controlled the House with an iron fist. They had a massive majority of Democrats in the House. And Reagan knew that. And Reagan knew that if he worked with him, he could get things done. And together they did Social Security reform, immigration reform, tax reform, and tax cuts. What possible way could that happen now, right? Fast forward to Bill Clinton, and a lot of people don't realize this. I had Newt Gingrich on my show, and he reminded me of it when he was on. Newt Gingrich is Speaker of the House after Newt passed his big agenda to, was it 10-point thing? Contract with America, yeah. He met with Clinton 38 times, just him and Gingrich. 38 times. And together, over 4 years, they did the unthinkable. They balanced the budget, right? Clinton agreed to workfare, like work requirements of people on welfare under certain circumstances. Kind of wildly different at the time. They balanced the budget 4 years in a row. That's mind-blowing, right? Because they worked together. I guess the point I'm saying is, at some point, we have to get a leader in the White House, and it's going to be probably by luck or by, it's going to have to be by luck to some extent. Because the way the primaries are now, they dictate towards the extreme elements of both parties, right? But we need someone in the White House that is going to be a transformative leader that will actually meet with the other side. Biden rarely met with leadership from Democrats and Republicans, and Trump certainly doesn't. You know, and Trump just said the other day, we're going to go it alone on this next bill. So they're both wrong, and and both sides do it. So Trump is a convenient punching bag, but both sides do it. He's just really bad at it. So we need a transformative leader, and that's, if we don't get that, we're going to be mired in this, and things will get worse. But I have the ultimate faith in our country. The country was on the verge of falling apart. And this guy, who's a 3-time failed politician, Abraham Lincoln, all of a sudden becomes president and somehow, some way, kept it together, right? And especially what he did after the war ended and not destroying the South. You know, he tried, there's a lot of mistakes after he died, but we will have that leader again, but it's up to all of us to try and look for that. And Clinton was really good because he sounded like a big bad liberal during the primary. As soon as it was over, he went right to the middle, and he stayed the rest of his time, and he was a very effective president, personal stuff aside.
Senator Slotkin, you mentioned Congress giving up many of its Article I powers. I'd like both of you to talk a little bit about what you see they're giving up, and what can we do, reforms in the House or the Senate that can be enacted to get members of Congress to reclaim their power.
Yeah, I mean, some of the lost power has been going on for a long time. So I think about, and again, in the spirit of Carl Levin, authorization of military force, right, in the Constitution. And, before our time in Congress, when the Iraq War came along, members of Congress voted to authorize that war, and then many of them paid the political price. And we really haven't had authorization of military force come on the floor of the House or Senate since then because no one wants to take that hard vote. So it's a power that is literally in the Constitution for the legislature, but we're just like, no thanks, that's too politically sensitive. Please don't bring me that power. I mean, or ask me to exert that power. And I have a problem with that, right? And certainly there's a huge trust deficit with the public on the left and the right with the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so to me, it's more important than ever than we kind of bring that power back. But that's long before Donald Trump. I think the thing that is sort of breathtaking for me is the power of the purse, which is like, you know, like what your kids learn, like how a bill becomes a law, and like all the, you know, your kids learn that one thing when they're in elementary school about Congress. And it's that when we vote to appropriate money, money shall be spent on those things. And when we do not appropriate money, you cannot, by law, go and spend on other things, right? Or on things that you're wanting. And the president has been doing both. He's been holding back money that has been appropriated by Congress. By the way, by Republicans in Congress. Like, I think about my now colleague, Susan Collins. She's the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee. How sad it is that the budget that she oversaw, like her legacy, he just is saying, nope, we're not going to spend on this thing or this thing or this thing. We're going to hold that money at the Treasury. And then it's called impoundment, right? If you want to get wonky about it. And the president's head of the Office of Management and Budget, the guy who controls the budget, is like a mastermind and creative and just dangerous guy, Russ Vought. But then the other piece of it is now we are upon potentially a government shutdown on September 30th where there'd be no money appropriated. And I think my peers just accept and know that he's just going to go ahead and keep spending money even though it's not appropriated. So there will be a lawsuit that will go up to the Supreme Court. This is a legal center. Like, I don't know how to be more clear than when something is written into the Constitution. It's not interpretive. But I don't know how that's gonna play out. And so, but the problem is my peers are the ones who are just rolling over and letting it happen. And they will privately tell me, like, Alyssa, we don't want to shut down the government because then the president will just spend money that Congress should have been appropriating, like it's worse. I'm like, he's doing that right now. And so I think part of it is the institution for many years has been pushing back or giving back some of the powers that were given to them. And then most recently, in the past 9 months, my Republican peers who chair all these committees, who do all the work of building these budgets, they're openly saying the president's just going to do what he wants with the money. And so to me, I don't know how to be more clear than to have something in the Constitution. So it really is about leadership. It really is about people saying, like, we just can't do this, and pushing back on the president. But that is nowhere to be found right now.
Yeah, and I agree with you almost entirely, but it's not just Trump. Biden did it, and all presidents have done it in recent times. Again, Trump just does it on steroids. But here's the problem, right? We have completely ceded the power of the purse to the executive branch. We have these agencies that are massive. I remember when I was first in Congress, I was going down to a meeting, I was going to see FAA or something, and there was like 3 blocks of buildings for the FAA. I'm like, this is just one sub-agency of, in government, and it's just so big. And how is it that the EPA is going to issue rules and regulations that have catastrophic effects on farming communities or on the economy, and they can do it by a rule? I mean, we have completely ceded power. We ceded power to the president to issue tariffs. It's clear in the Constitution that Congress is to control tariffs. We just gave it over to the president, and now he's blowing a hole in that, right? But it's not just that. Every agency has way too much authority. We've ceded so much through the rulemaking processes of agencies, and this is getting kind of wonky, to use Alyssa's term, but that's where a lot of the problem is. We don't legislate anymore, And you know what, Congress kind of like, let them do the nitty gritty, then we don't have to, right? No, no laws, no problems. And, by the way, I venture to guess if we went and looked at Alyssa's number of bills she passed, the number of bills I passed, I know mine is. I think I have more bills passed than the entire 44 members of the Freedom Caucus combined. So they don't want to legislate. They just want to lob the bombs, get the clicks, get through the primary, and they're here, right? And it's kind of that mentality of, with respect to the agencies. These agencies are enormous, and they're so powerful, and they're nameless, faceless bureaucrats that are accountable to no one, issuing these catastrophic rulemaking things that are really a problem. So to rein that back in, to me, would be a very, very big thing. What would that mean? We would have to work more. We'd have to actually pass bills. But how many weeks did we gone and we're there voting on bills like to save, it's just stupid bills and nothing's happening, right?
So how much, I want to probe this a little bit. You mentioned, John, working more the way members of Congress work.
Yeah.
How much of this is partly due to the amount of fundraising that members of Congress have to do in order to stay in office or in order to rise? It seems like, members of Congress have been giving away their power, not passing bills, but part of it is they are spending a lot of their time, rather than developing expertise on the things they care about, on other things. Is fundraising part of this?
I don't know. I'm interested to hear what you have to say. Yes, it's a pain, right? But if you're in a district like mine, and I always had the biggest target in my head because I always thought they could flip my district. So they would target me, so therefore other groups would come in with money. So I kind of look at fundraising like, it's like landscaping your lawn and doing your landscaping. Keep up with it, and it doesn't dominate things, right? You maybe have a breakfast at 8 a.m. before it votes, and you may have something in between votes on luncheon, and you may have a dinner, but that's really, it doesn't consume your day. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah,
but
I mean, I think, look, we have the worst campaign finance system known to man. It's like a Frankenstein.
sure.
It's horrible.
Because of free speech, right?
Yeah, we do like that.
Yeah.
But I think some of the people, I think it's more than just fundraising. There are people who are in Congress for the wrong reasons because they want to build their brand.
Yeah.
Right? Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to win her seat consistently. I don't think she has much of a challenge.
Matt Gaetz always wanted to build his brand. Yeah.
And these are people who, they're in safe seats, so they don't need to fundraise in order to, because they're in a tough, Democratic state, and John's one of the few Republicans. They are just being outlandish and spending a lot of time on other activities besides giving a single crap about what happens in their committees or with legislation.
Because they don't legislate.
Yeah, there's no accountability.
Why is that tail wagging the dog? There was some really great polling I wanted to talk about at some point here. There's a pollster, a Republican pollster named Kristen Soltis Anderson, and she published something a couple of weeks ago that really struck me. She said that her polling reveals that we're not nearly as polarized as a population or as an electorate as many members of Congress claim we are, and people in the media that are trying to influence.
I saw that. Yes, I know what you're saying.
Very interesting. So her stats show that about 11%, I think it was about 13% of the electorate viewed itself as strongly liberal, and about 11% of the electorate found itself or considered itself strongly conservative. So there's this vast group of people, 75, 76% of the electorate, that doesn't land in either of those camps. And Anderson says, doesn't mean they all agree. It actually means that they have very mixed views, right? They might be conservative on the economy, but liberal on social policies or vice versa. Why is it that people who are so extreme dominate the conversation and seem to be able to intimidate the rest of the population, or at least I don't think anybody in this room feels intimidated by those people, but their representatives seem to be cowed. Why is that?
Gerrymandering and social media and the internet. Those three things are absolutely why.
Okay, so what does Congress need to do? Congress, the point of representation is to communicate, listen to your constituents. The Supreme Court once said that the role of Congress is to be the eyes and voice and to embody the will and wisdom of their constituents.
Let me
Why
just interrupt
is
you.
it?
If your district's 70% Republican and hers is 70% Democrat, you don't give a crap about the other side. You don't have to. Right. So therefore, not only can you fundraise off of that, you can ensure your seat by being incendiary, right? Ensure you're never going to have a real primary, and everybody thinks you're great because you're a nut job. But you can also go after people like me. They were always, my own colleagues were constantly tweeting about me. Because they didn't like my votes. They were trying to intimidate me. I'm like, what planet are we on here? Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment, you don't go against the Republican Party. They don't care about that. They don't care about the party. It's almost like a game, like Alyssa said. And a lot of them aren't there for the right reasons. But I think gerrymandering has had a titanic problem that contributes to this. And internet enables them to exploit it. I think that's why I see it.
I'll give you a recent example, right? And I'm sure it'll be controversial in this room, but in May, I'm like 4 months into being a senator, and I took my first vote where I was the only Democrat.
How dare you?
Yes, it was. It was a repeal of California's EV mandate, right? Which is, those of you, all our Michiganders will remember, I said over and over and over in public and on TV commercials that I would never support an EV mandate. I don't care what you drive, but I want to make the next generation of vehicles, right? That was my thing, my mantra, which I believe. And I don't own an electric vehicle. Word got around the Senate Democrats that I was going to be voting for this. And one by one, I had Senate leaders coming up to me and saying, you're going to be the only one. And you're not going to imagine how the groups are going to come after you. And I had very senior people with their finger in my face saying, you're going to get creamed by the internet. And I said, that's fine, I know. And now then they moved to doing it publicly on the Senate floor. So C-SPAN is on, right? They're doing it so that their colleagues can see them yelling at me. This is a Democratic thing. And I had a senior leader of the Democratic leadership kind of, again, finger in my face, and he walked away, and another senator came up and said, wow, that's a lot of pressure. I said, your definition of pressure and my definition of pressure are different. That is a bunch of folks who have been here for a really long time who are telling me that the internet's going to be mad at me. I'm from Michigan. The internet's always mad at me. The left is always mad, or the right is always mad every single day.
That means you're doing your job, but they're both mad at you.
Every single day. And I cast the vote, and by the time I got home and I was driving up I-75, the auto manufacturers had put up "Thank you, Slotkin" billboards on my route because I know my state. And so but it was an example of, it wasn't I wasn't being lobbied by my own side on an issue of principle. California had no chance of achieving their mandate. Like, it wasn't that California's about to be successful. No. It was that the internet would be big mad. And that, I think, tells you a lot about what people think about in Washington.
But I will tell you, the vast majority of members would not have the guts to stand up to him because they want to get reelected at all costs. And that's the pathetic part about our system right now.
So it's leadership that we not only need a different kind of leadership in the White House, we've got to have a different kind of leadership in Congress. We've got to have members of Congress who think differently. I was out the other day. I think a lot of you have seen this sign that says, "Help prevent truth decay."
That's cute.
And when I saw that, the first thing that came into my mind was that the current administration needs at least a deep cleaning or maybe a root canal. I want to ask you about the role of Congress in finding the facts and whether we need reforms or we need to do something to try to reinvigorate the process of fact-finding, the oversight process, the way in which members of Congress proceed. Because right now, oversight, as the public is seeing it on TV in Congress, is unfortunately very often not oversight. It's impugn and destroy your opponents. It's try to win the next election, but it's not what you were describing, Senator. How do we get members, how do we get the institution to point itself back toward doing oversight that matters?
Go ahead.
I mean, so we, back when John and I were both serving in the House, we had this question come up, that like Trump is exposing all of these gaps in our sort of oversight, the oversight machine that previous presidents followed out of habit and kind of good standards, right? If you subpoenaed the Bush administration, the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of Homeland Security to come up and testify, they came, right? You could disagree with them every single day, but they came.
Or you wouldn't have to even subpoena them, they would
Of
come
course,
without a
right,
subpoena.
exactly. But what we saw in our time was like they just said no, and then you go to see what is your accountability, right? It says that they have to come and serve and I mean come and testify, but they're not doing it. And I remember the craziest briefing where someone said like, we really haven't tested this very much. You can go to court, but in olden times, you could send the Capitol Police to pick them up and keep them detained in the basement of the Capitol. I mean, it was like some crazy stuff. It was some crazy stuff. And so, of course, we're not going to do that, right? And so we have a lack of accountability that depended on the good stewardship of leaders, whether they were Democrats or Republicans. And when Trump lost in 2020, a number of us went to Speaker Pelosi and said, you really need to take all those things where we saw holes, and you need to do a package of reforms, of laws that would close those gaps, right? Because he's exposing all of these things. And she was like, look, we have a new president. We're trying to focus on a new agenda. I think probably people thought Trump wouldn't be back, and we never closed a lot of those holes, a few here and there. But to me, it may be a little far-fetched to feel like folks are ready to do this, but Trump might be able to get us there, that a bipartisan group of people are like, okay, we don't want to be going through that again. Let's put together a package of like plugs that plug the holes in accountability on different branches of government.
Right, and I totally agree with all that she said, so I'm not going to replow the field, but just something that came to mind is the hearings have become theater for the internet, right? How many times, I mean, I'm a prosecutor, judges would kill me if I didn't ask a focused question and it wasn't leading, and these people have gone for 5 minutes screaming at the witness and never ask a question. How is that oversight? That's not oversight. That's political theater that's driven by the social media. They take that clip, they send it out, they fundraise off it within half an hour of the hearing being over. That's part of the problem, but I totally agree with Alyssa. There's holes that we can fix, but make no mistake about it, we get a lot of information. Our staffs are really smart, and they're very competent. And I'm not just saying it because you're here. No, no, but there's a lot of, we get a ton of great information, and we get a pretty good feel for a lot of what's going on already. So the oversight opportunities are there, but it's become too much political theater, and I don't know how you fix that. I always said, make committee rules where you have to ask a question, you can't pontificate. If you pontificate for more than a minute, you lose your time, maybe. I don't know, something, because it is so out of control. I mean, it's just screaming.
I would just say my best day in the Senate so far, and I literally put out a post saying it was my best day in the Senate, was the closed door markup of the Pentagon budget on the Senate Armed Services Committee. And we closed the doors and we debated real issues of substance about the future of the military. And Democrats were pushing back on Republicans. Republicans were pushing back on Democrats. Republicans were saying, okay, I know you don't like this provision. What if I take another 2 hours, my staff will go rewrite it, we'll come back, let's see. Literally real-time negotiating. You would be thrilled that this was even happening.
Senator, explain a little bit what actually transpired there. The doors were closed, so the public was not observing this. So talk about, there are a lot of people, and I wouldn't criticize their intentions for wanting to expand transparency and to shine a brighter light on, say, what goes on in Congress or what goes on at the state level in state legislatures. But I think there is a cost to that, which is that when you can negotiate, sometimes it's better not to be negotiating while on C-SPAN.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it is, so this is the problem, right, is that if I announce that I think every hearing should now be private,
Oh, my God.
I mean, I'm like a
look,
horrible
I think.
counter, accountability, like it runs against the central tenets of our country. But pretty amazing things. And by the way, the Problem Solvers Caucus, which John and I were in, did not have like journalists there. No one's on camera, so you can push and pull on each other in different ways. A lot of my peers don't want to be seen cooperating with the other side of the aisle. They literally lose, right? Whereas I gain as a Michigander, a lot of other people lose when they're seen to be friendly. I mean, I walked onto the Senate floor a couple of months ago, and the senators, like, they all watch each other. I kind of say it's like a police state a little bit. Like, everyone knows what everyone's doing. And I walked by, and I stopped, and I talked to Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz is working on an artificial intelligence bill, and I'm very focused on artificial intelligence. So whether I like Ted Cruz or not is not the point. The man has the bill, and he has the chairmanship. So I'm going to talk to Ted Cruz. And I talked with him for a while. We were getting into the substance, and I then walked out of the floor and to a meeting with a bunch of Democrats. And they were all like, why were you talking to Ted Cruz? Don't trust Ted Cruz. I'm like, I don't know that I trust Ted Cruz. I want to work on this bill. And so there's actually weird, like, peer pressure from Democrats from very blue states to not work across the aisle. And it's so you can't go closed door on everything. But similarly, if John and I worked on a bill together, we were on the same committee, and let's say we even worked on like an immigration bill, something really sensitive to both sides of the aisle. And we're like, okay, we're going to do a press conference. We're going to try and get on the news and talk about how Democrats and Republicans work together to get to this bill. I guarantee you, like, just getting any media to pay attention to that, nearly impossible.
That's a good
It's
point,
just,
too.
it's not
Big part of the
sexy.
problem.
It's not
They
interesting.
thrive on the chaos. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, they do.
and so, people are like, we want you out there more talking about this bipartisan message and showing how you're I'm like, it's not like a gal ain't trying. But if I'm not shouting at someone on the Senate floor, then it's not interesting, it's not sexy, and it doesn't get coverage. And so there are these perverse media incentives that play against bipartisanship.
Let me just add 2 seconds to that to reinforce a point. My local paper drove me crazy, the biggest one in my district. Reported on less than 10% of the bills I had passed. Because it's not, but if it was something controversial, they go at it, they attack you 6 ways with Sunday. But unless it was controversial, they did not. 90% of the bills that passed, doing the nuts and bolts of people's work, they never informed the public because it wasn't sexy enough.
It's an interesting thought process to think, what if Carl Levin was still in the Senate? How would Carl Levin fare in the social media age?
Yeah.
And I think in some ways, it may be that the youngest members, find him like a badass and kind of like he would be a grandfatherly, funky, like kind of how RBG.
Carl is RBG,
Like
yes.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg became like the hero to 17-year-olds. And I think maybe that could happen to Carl, but in general, the media would not cover half of what he did because he wasn't a bomb thrower, and he wasn't just, he was tag teaming with people like McCain.
But somehow his message got through, that what you mentioned about the integrity that he displayed, he displayed that because people saw him working with people on the other side of the aisle, not necessarily agreeing with folks on the other side, but working with them to get to the bottom of the facts. I want to say one thing to the audience. Make sure that you are filling out your question cards and bringing them. Oh, I see people with question cards. Hands are raised. Okay.
Wow,
Please
they're
bring
ready.
them up. I want to jump to another question because, Senator, you just mentioned something. You must have a sixth sense. You mentioned AI.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask both of you about your views about AI and whether you view it as something that is a threat to our democracy or something that can be a tool in support of renewing our democracy. How does it affect Congress, and what do you see happening with AI?
Go ahead.
I mean, okay, so first of all, Michiganders should know that AI is kind of coming to a theater near us because Los Alamos National Lab out in Santa Fe is starting a new wing just focused on AI at University of Michigan. So it's a coming. Potentially up to 200 or more scientists being based in Ann Arbor. And as a consequence of that center and lots of other interest in AI, I'm sure most Michiganders have heard of data centers being interested in Michigan, right? Like you need power, a lot of power to run AI. So it's coming to a theater near us. I went out to Los Alamos 2 weeks ago to get kind of the tour and hear about what they're planning and to get the classified briefings on what they're seeing in AI. And I would say I came away thinking that AI in many ways is the best analogy we have to previous technology is actually nuclear technology. Meaning when it's 30-something and someone discovers nuclear fission and the scientists start to figure out, wow, this could have tremendous benefits and tremendous risks. And what the hell do we do about a new technology that's game-changing like that? That is, to me, the closest analogy I have on AI. I think AI is going to change our economy more than the internet did from all the briefings. And when I tell you I've tried to get really smart on this as a former CIA analyst who's interested in this, and that I probably am in a group of like 7 senators who understand AI even at my very shallow level. Like it's just, that's number one, is like people don't understand it. And so what I think Congress should do, I've actually made 2 recommendations. The AI race, particularly on military use of the AI, is as important to win as the nuclear race or the space race was in previous eras. And so I have suggested that the Congress issue a Manhattan Project, right, where we actually add money and research and scientists, including lots of immigrant and foreign scientists who helped us get to nuclear technology. But we invest and make sure we don't cede that race to China. I think that's very, very important. And then number 2, they had the Atomic Energy Commission, which was a place where CEOs of energy companies sat together with members of the government, and they figured out the rules of the road for nuclear energy so that it wouldn't destroy everyone on Earth, but would actually be able to benefit humanity in the form of energy. I think we need that same type of structure to figure out the rules of the road because it's that consequential. And yes, you've probably heard all some of the scary stories around AI. I would just offer on the other side of the coin, like they're going to be able to figure things out, like new treatments for diseases and potentially cures in ways that human beings have not yet discovered. I mean, there is real potential for good, but there's also real potential for bad, especially if bad actors get a hold of it. So rules of the road, I think, are important that don't squelch innovation, but do put some left and right limits on this very new technology.
John?
Yeah, I agree with everything she said. Knowledge is power, and AI is knowledge, right? So absolutely 100% agree with everything you said. But the only thing I'll add is something you haven't said, and that is it's going to be interesting to see AI's effect on developing countries, third world countries, people with that don't have the capacity otherwise to figure things out and develop. AI is going to give them that opportunity, and that's going to be fascinating to see that. I mean, what the advances in medicine and technology are going to be amazing, but there's always the guardrails. It's like, I think we've done advances in cyber without, it's like building a car with no brakes. We didn't have any safety rails, and so now you have these huge cyber attacks and that are crippling industries, crippling healthcare, because we never, when we're building our cyber capabilities, never demanded to have guardrails with it. AI needs to be able to build the car with the safety features as they advance the car. And that's why it's so important, like Alyssa said, to have a Manhattan-type project priority for this, because this is, it's coming no matter what, and we better have a better handle on it than we do right now.
I'm now going to really try to go to questions from the audience because our time is starting to run short. What non-Trump related or non-President Trump related issues, and maybe non-AI, because we just talked about AI issues, do you think Congress should be focusing its oversight agenda on?
We've covered a lot of them. I mean, we really have. I think for sure the economic issues, and for sure, I think, I'm going to expound a bit on what I said before, economic issues that we're ceding to the federal government. Congress is not controlling the power of the purse. If I could point to anything else, I'd point to that as a big issue. That means tariff policy, that means economic policy, that means reining in these agencies that are rulemaking beyond their purview or changing the rules so that they can't. I think that to me is one of the big things. Economically, we've completely lost control of the executive branch.
Yeah, I would say if Congress was actually mission focused, I would say the lion's share of its time would be focused on economic security for Americans, because if people can't get into the middle class, it's a stability issue for the United States, right? I think if you want to understand the moment that we're in, the fractious moment where people are turned against each other, is because people don't feel like they can achieve what they were told they can achieve. So economic security issues, I think we'd be focused on tech issues and getting a handle on them. AI, yes, but things like cryptocurrency. I mean, you have countries who are just skipping traditional banking and going right to cryptocurrency that are backed by Chinese currency instead of the dollar. That's a problem, okay? So technology of all kinds, cyber. And then to me, the national security arena is changing because of that technology. Warfare is not just going to be tanks and fixed-wing aircraft in a war zone very far away. The combination of cyber attack and AI means that the cyber attacks, and I'm sure everyone in this room has a story of being hacked or having their kids' school be ransomed, their hospital be ransomed. AI is going to supercharge that. So redefining homeland security and really ensuring that we're organized correctly as a government to protect civilians that are now on the front lines of this warfare coming from very far away. So those three things are what I would spend.
Basically everything.
It's the future-looking things, and right now, most people I know are focused on tomorrow. Either if they're Democrats, they're focused on what Trump does today. If they're Republicans, they're focused on what they want to do in their limited way without pissing the president off. And no one's thinking about 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, the problems around the corner, which is a fundamental responsibility of leaders.
So that dovetails.
For 2 seconds on something she said, because it's really important. She keeps touching on it. She's 100% right. One of the reasons Trump turned a lot of young Democratic voters to him, and not because of his philosophy, because they're so angry and so forlorn. And I got 3 boys in their 20s. And they're all, I don't know how they voted, I don't ask them, but they all say the same thing. I'm working my tail off, and I don't know how we're going to get a house. I don't see there's any way to get ahead. And then you have this guy coming along, they're trying something different, and boy is Trump different. But the economic security issue among young adults is a huge issue that no one's paying attention to like they should.
Sure.
That's a great point. I wanted to, and that reinforces this question, another question from the audience, about the people who have most at stake in that future you're talking about. Our audience member asks, how do we re-engage young people in bipartisanship, and what role can oversight play in that effort?
You got to lead by example. And we don't have much leaders in that regard right now. So how is a kid, it's not an example why most kids in their 20s are kind of checked out of politics overall, and most of them don't want to identify with a party. The biggest growing segment of the population that's going to say they're an independent or non-affiliated voter is that group. They are so disaffected because they look at these leaders and they're disgusted, And they weren't exactly enamored with Biden, and they're certainly not enamored with Trump, although Trump's thumb in the eye is making some of them feel better. But we got to lead by example, and we don't have that leadership right now, right? And oversight, holding people's feet to the fire, all that stuff can only happen if people put down their swords long enough to try and do what's good for the common good. And that's a hard thing. And I'm not here to have a campaign for Alyssa, but you need more people like her, who I think doesn't give a shit about the consequences.
I give a little shit. Like, I would just say, I was just coming from Macomb County. I was in Sterling Heights and did a big event there. And a kid, he's a second year at Michigan State, came up to me. And he's like, I'm here, but it was, he's one of the only college kids who were in the room. And how do we get, it just seems like my peers, like, they kind of vote on their instinct. They voted for Trump. A lot of my friends voted for Trump, he said, because they just that was their gut, was that he was better. But then kind of check out, how do you get people interested? And I'm like, my friend, it is not going to come from me, the 49-year-old, telling you, the 19-year-old, what is going to be interesting to you. This is why we need young people to lead. We need young people to come forward and be engaged. The youngest generation, while many of them are checked out, there are definitely some who are very politically engaged. And we have young people, speaking to young people is a lot more successful at bridging that divide. But I think there's a lot of discussion now about, do you go on the Manosphere podcasts? Do you go on these things that many of us probably wouldn't have done 5-10 years ago, for sure, to get to new audiences? And I will just tell you, if they're not coming to you, you better go to them. If you're interested in engaging them, and waiting for 19-year-olds to show up, at the MEA office in Sterling Heights, is just, it's not going to happen. So you got to change up how you engage and go to those students.
Let me give a quick example. The Joe Rogan podcast. Remember their last election? Harris didn't go on it. She refused to. Trump went on it for 2 hours. 90 million viewers. I mean, that's the new technology. You got to embrace it. She's 100% right.
So we've only got a few minutes left. Somebody raised a really interesting question. Constitution Day is coming up. I think it's September 17th. It's next week. How do you recommend we honor the Constitution?
Let's start.
Go ahead.
I'm thinking.
Drink heavily. No, I'll take a stab at it. I mean, I think we honor the Constitution by being committed to self-sacrifice. And I know it's a drum I keep beating, but it's got to be somehow, some way for people to demand that you do not what's right for yourself, what's right for your country. That's what our forefathers did. And that's what a lot of people did. Look at the way people sacrifice their lives for our country. They didn't sacrifice their lives for popularity or clicks on the internet. They sacrificed their lives to make it better for their families they left behind. And we have to get back to that. That's what it's all about in my mind, and that's what we've lost focus of. And certainly this president is far more concerned about what's good for him as opposed to what's good for the country. And I say that as a Republican, and it bothers me because I don't even know if he's really a Republican. He wanted the big, beautiful bill no matter what. And I guarantee he doesn't know a lot of what's in there, but he wanted to have the win. He wanted the pelt on the wall more than he cared what was in it. That is not self-sacrifice. That is the antithesis of it. If we want to honor the Constitution, we need to honor it. Like, think about the fact that everybody that signed the Declaration of Independence signed their death warrant with the British government. If any of them were caught, they would be hanged or shot right away. They knew it when they were signing it, yet they did it anyways. That's honoring the legacy of them by trying to just have a little more self-sacrifice in this country. I know it's kind of an amorphous idea, but that's what I would do, and somehow try and do that. And quite frankly, that's why I'm coming here with my friend Alyssa, and that's why the TV show I have, and I'm not plugging it, it's PBS, don't worry about it. It's just that this show started from nothing, and it's a top-rated show in my area, and it's just got picked up nationwide, not because I'm Walter Cronkite, but because I'm talking about things on both sides and talking about things in a balanced manner. People are craving that stuff. They really are. And so if you want to honor the Constitution, stop making everything about yourself and start making it about the country again, because that's what our forefathers did.
Yeah, and I would just say that, like, sometimes just posting, like, a section of the Constitution, it speaks directly to the moment that we're living in, right? Or just telling the story of one particular founder and what they did and what they risked. I think, we all know that we can, when we lament, that we don't have civic education the way we used to have civic education. That, I mean, I remember before my election in 2022, I was getting my hair cut, and my hairdresser was like, wait, what are you again? Like, what brand, what are you again? And I said, I'm a member of Congress. And she said, is the president a member of Congress too?
Oh my God.
And I'm like, this is my hairdresser. Like, you know, I mean, I can't believe I haven't done more education. But I think
That's fake news.
no. And so I think that we sometimes forget that the younger generation may not have seen or like kind of interplayed with this stuff. And so just posting something is, I think, can speak for itself and stand on itself, stand alone without, you know, the overt criticism. It speaks for itself.
I love that you both have said this. One of the things we're trying to do at the Levin Center is create a civic education program that we're now disseminating to teachers all over the state of Michigan that is based, it's called Learning by Hearings. And the idea is that you base civic education, or at least you give social studies teachers the opportunity to help students learn about congressional investigations and the hearings they held, and if they want to, they can stage their own hearing. And they become the investigators tackling an issue and practicing how to play those roles where they might be on opposite sides of an issue. So it feels like what we've got to be doing is people in leadership positions encouraging other folks in government, maybe more in local government, to get more young people involved, because they're the ones who are going to lead us in the future, and they have the greatest stake in that future. Well, we are just about out of time. I've tried my best to get to as many of these questions as I can, but I'm afraid I haven't got to all of them.
You have two long-winded former politicians and a politician, so
Two
it's our fault. It's our fault.
Outstanding leaders here. Well, first of all, I would love it if you would join me in thanking Senator Slotkin and Congressman Katko for being here. This is again, a time of reflection and celebration for us at the Levin Center. It's hard to celebrate in these times because these are tough times, and these are times when most of us feel, or many of us feel, really beleaguered by what we're seeing on the news, what we're seeing in our state and in our country. But it's only through conversations like these and conversations that all of you are having with people that you know, with people that you love, that we can start to find a way forward. And I want to invite all of you to continue this conversation out in the hall. We have a strolling dinner planned for all of you, so please make your way out there. And most importantly, the bar is on the other side of the atrium, so make use of that as you wish. And again, thank you to Senator Slotkin, Congressman Katko, and thanks to all of you.